Hello and welcome to the 2023 Sexual Assault Awareness Month webinar series. Our first webinar of the four-part series is exploring the link between dating apps and sexual assault, novel research findings. Our presenter today is Dr. Julie L. Valentine, Associate Dean and Associate Professor at the Brigham Young University College of Nursing. Without further delay, here is Dr. Valentine.
Welcome to the webinar, exploring the link between dating apps and sexual assault, novel research findings. I'm Dr. Julie Valentine, who conducted this research. I have no funding to disclose for this specific research project and no conflict of interest. I want to acknowledge FTCOE in sponsoring this webinar. Here are our objectives for this webinar. At the end of the webinar, I would hope that participants will have increased knowledge on dating apps usage and the user demographics. Also that they will demonstrate understanding of, in our research, how we have categorized dating app facilitated sexual assault and our research findings, and then consider interventions to improve dating app safety. So let's dive in on background. I am a practicing forensic nurse as well as a researcher. I practice with Wasatch Forensic Nurses in 2 counties in the state of Utah. In our forensic nursing team and in talking to forensic nurses, sexual assault nurse examiners across the country, we have discussed this increase that we've seen in patients who come in for sexual assault medical forensic exam, who report meeting the assailant on a dating app. And this has been going on for several years, this anecdotal increase that we've talked about. And as a researcher, I thought, I need to dive into this. Let's actually see what is happening. Are we seeing an increase of rapes that develop when people meet on a dating app? Along with that, I'm sure many of you have heard media reports of physical and sexual violence murders that have occurred after an assailant has met someone on a dating app. These 2 beautiful women were both murdered after they connected with someone on a dating app at the first initial in-person meeting. The top young woman's name is Mackenzie Lewick. These are both from Utah. And then the other woman is Ashlyn Black. I want to acknowledge the many victims who have experienced sexual, physical violence following meeting on dating apps and others. And our goal of our research is try to represent their voices, to enact policy and practice changes to decrease sexual violence. So, what do we know about why people use dating apps and how many people use dating apps? Well, Tinder, the #1 dating app company, has over 75 million users worldwide. We've actually seen an increase in online dating app usage with the pandemic. When people were in lockdown, it was hard to meet others. So you could meet people virtually, and dating app usage exploded. There has not been as much research in the United States regarding sexual assaults that have resulted from dating apps, but the United Kingdom's National Crime Agency report that was recently released has some really disturbing information. Their report is that they found that women who reported sexual assault between the ages of 20 and 29 years, that 40% of the victims reported connecting with the assailant on a dating app. Women under 20 years, 22% of victims. They also found that men under 20 years who reported a sexual assault, 31% reported that they met on a dating app. So when we dive into, so why do people use dating apps? There's actually been research on this. The number one reason, entertainment. It can be very entertaining to scroll through these profile pics. I know many college students that will stream their phone to a larger screen and they'll look at them with all of their friends. So highly entertaining to look through these dating app profiles. But other research has shown some gender differences as well in dating app usage. Across all genders, outside of entertainment, the next reason why people use dating apps is to establish new relationships. Some report establishing friendships, while others report the goal to establish romantic relationships or long-term relationships. Outside of those two primary reasons to use dating apps, there have been some gender differences noted. Men have reported use of dating apps because there's an ease of communication. It's a lot easier to connect and chat virtually than it is in person. The next is excitement. And the third reason specific to men is casual sex. Women have found the number one reason across all, even stronger than in the men, is for friendship and new relationships. But women, interestingly, research has shown that they use dating apps for validation. We're going to talk more about that after we discuss some of our research findings. But validation that helps them how they feel about themselves. There also has been research that has looked at personality characteristics of dating app users, and some disturbing findings, primarily for men who use dating apps. They found that men that use dating apps are more likely to have what are called dark triad traits. Now, this certainly does not mean all men that use dating apps. This is going to be a small percentage, but they have found that men that date through dating apps, there is a higher percentage of men that have these dark triad traits. These include Machiavellianism. So Machiavellianism is a personality trait that denotes cunningness, an ability to manipulate others or do whatever is necessary to gain power. Narcissism is a focus on one's own needs. And psychopathy, individuals with psychopathy have a lack of empathy and generally poor behavioral control. And then sadism, which is deriving pleasure from inflicting pain. So when we look at, all right, what additional research is out there on dating app and sexual assault, it's pretty limited. There is a study by Rouse and colleagues out of Australia. It's a small study. There's only an N of 11, meaning 11 victims. And they found that 100% of these victims sustained physical injuries and 66% sustained anogenital injuries, which was substantially more than other rape victims. So for our research team, when we were looking at how are we going to conduct this study, the first thing that you have to do is you have to come up with a very clear definition of what you're going to measure. We collect data from sexual assault medical forensic examination forms. So I want to clarify that the information I'm sharing with you really is just the tip of the iceberg. In Utah, where this data is from, but I think we can apply our findings to other areas across the United States. But in Utah, our numbers are that only about 12% of individuals who experience a sexual assault report for a sexual assault medical forensic examination. So I am just giving you information from these patients who reported. So when we looked at how are we going to measure sexual assaults that result from meeting on a dating app, we read the history of the assault that is written in the sexual assault medical forensic examination forms. And it was very difficult to tease out cases where a victim and assailant may have met 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago on a dating app, and then the victim is raped. But what we could easily measure are cases where the victim reported meeting the assailant on a dating app and the sexual assault occurred at the first and only, but initial in-person meeting. That we could measure. And so that's how we coded this information and termed these dating app facilitated sexual assault, or DAPSA. We then wanted to say, how are we going to compare DAPSA cases to other cases of rape or non-DAPSA cases, and realized we really needed to compare this just to acquaintance sexual assault, because we code cases where they meet on a dating app and the individual is raped at the first in-person meeting. We code those as acquaintance sexual assault. So we needed to compare the DAPSA cases to non-DAPSA cases in acquaintance sexual assault. So let me tell you a bit about how we define acquaintance sexual assault. We code something as an acquaintance sexual assault if the patient reports knowing the assailant's name and having what we determine as approximately 2 hours or more interaction with the assailant. So I'll give you an example. If we read the history of a sexual assault and the patient or victim said, I was at a party, there was a guy there, I don't know his name, I didn't talk to him, but I got tired, I went in a back room and fell asleep, and I woke up and this guy was on top of me and they were experiencing a sexual assault. We would code that as stranger. But if the patient said, I was at a party, I met this guy named Jim, and we hung out together at the party, played some games, watched a video, whatever. I got tired, I went in a back room and fell asleep, and I woke up and this person was on top of me. We would code that as acquaintance because the patient knew the name and also had a meaningful interaction with them. You'll notice that I go back and forth between saying patient and victim. I use the terms patient because it's a forensic nurse, these are my patients, and victim and survivor interchangeably, often depending on who I am or what audience I'm addressing at the time. So after we've clarified those definitions, let's dig into our research question. Our research question was pretty darn simple. We wanted to look at, are there differences between dating app facilitated sexual assaults? Again, they met on a dating app and the sexual assault occurred at the first in-person meeting, and non-DAPSA, or cases, many times people refer to these as date rapes, but non-DAPSA, and these are all by acquaintance assailants. Our theoretical framework for this study primarily is the routine activities theory. This theory is used in other cyber crimes. Many of you are likely very familiar with this theory, but this theory states that for a crime to occur, you need a likely or motivated offender, the absence of a capable guardian or someone to intervene and stop a crime from occurring, and a suitable target, which we refer to as a vulnerable individual. In our article, in our theoretical framework, we also mention the confluence model of sexual aggression. And the confluence model of sexual aggression just focuses on this likely offender or motivated offender. And when this model has been applied to sexual assault, they found that motivated offenders to commit sexual assault crimes, males, have hostile masculinity and a desire for impersonal sex. We're going to talk more about a suitable target or a vulnerable individual as we go through and discuss our findings. When we consider cyber crimes, certainly when you just have two individuals communicating online, you generally have an absence of a capable guardian, which we certainly see in dating apps. They're not meeting in front of people where you might have bystanders that can intervene. This is between two people in a virtual setting. So what are our numbers that we're looking at? We have a very large database where we collect, as I stated, information from sexual assault medical forensic examination forms. We collect a lot of information, about 280 variables from these forms. We then track these cases to determine if the sexual assault kit was submitted, and then track through the DNA analysis findings. So our information is drawn from this larger data set, of which between 2010 and 2020, we have, as you can see, over 7,000 cases. We now have continued to add to this data set, and we are getting close to about 10,000 cases. But we didn't start coding for dating app facilitated sexual assault until 2017. And 2017 to 2020, we have 3,413 sexual assault cases. We then looked at how many of these cases were coded as acquaintance sexual assault cases. These are all victims who are the age of 14 years and older. These are also all victims who wanted to talk to law enforcement to prosecute their case, meaning that I'm not sharing any information with you that are restricted sexual assault cases. These are all cases where at the time the victim had the exam, they wanted to talk to law enforcement and look at prosecuting their cases. So out of these 1,947 acquaintance sexual assault cases over the age of 14, we had 274. That means 14% of this sample were victims that met on a dating app and were sexually assaulted at the first in-person meeting. And you can see there that 15% of these DAPSA cases were adolescents between the age of 14 and 17 years. So dating apps require individuals to be over the age of 18, but dating apps do not require any verification of age, and people can be who they want to be on online presence or dating apps. And so you can see that we have a fairly high percentage of individuals who were sexually assaulted who are under the age of 18. So on our findings, I'm going to share this information with you in three sections. We divide our variables into patient characteristics, assailant actions, and assault characteristics. What is missing there is assailant information. This is because our data is from sexual assault medical forensic examination forms. And when we are getting our information from our patients, we don't have much information on the assailant. Their age, we don't collect information on the assailant race. We know nothing about the assailant past criminal history because the victims don't know about this information about the assailants. And then the assault characteristics, what happened during the sexual assault. We completed descriptive statistics, chi-square analysis, and t-tests on the variables. So to begin, we're going to start with patient characteristics. Remember, we are looking at, are these cases different? Are we seeing that there are differences in victims between those who are sexually assaulted after meeting on a dating app and those sexually assaulted by acquaintances that did not meet on a dating app? And we have found some significant differences. You can see here that in DAPSA cases, it's less likely that patients used alcohol before the assault, 25% compared to 45%. We also found that victims who are sexually assaulted after meeting on a dating app are less likely to be homeless, meaning they have a higher socioeconomic status. They have a home, more likely to have a home to live in, those that use dating apps. This was really disturbing. We found that victims of DAPSA cases are much more likely to self-disclose mental illness. Now, we have other articles that our research team has written talking about mental illness as a significant vulnerability for sexual assault. When I do trainings with law enforcement, I explain this phenomenon because you'll see our non-DAPSA cases is high, 47%, right? In Utah, our percentage at any given time of women, and most of our victims are women, is 22%. So when you look at 60% and 47% of these victims, substantially higher. So when I talk to law enforcement about it, I explain it like this. If you have a motivated offender or perpetrator who walks into a party and there's a group of young women who are women or men who are laughing and having a good time together, connecting, and then there's an individual who's sitting off to the side. Maybe that individual is more likely to have depression, social anxiety, maybe possibly addiction disorders, but some degree of mental illness. Who's the offender most likely to target? It's going to be that individual who is away from the group. We believe that explains why we see those with mental illness, and this is a range of mental illness, as being more vulnerable. This is a high vulnerability for sexual assault. But interestingly, we find it's even higher for those that are DAPSA victims. So remember when I talked about that women are more likely to use dating apps for validation? It may be that those with mental illness, depression, anxiety, that's even heightened in them. And it might be that these motivated offenders are more likely to sway these individuals with mental illness to meet with them because they tap into this need for validation. I've also been asked if the algorithms that are used in dating apps, are they more likely to pair these characteristics potentially of motivated offenders with those with mental illness? And I have no idea about that, but I have been asked about that as well. So we're going to go back into talking about our other patient characteristics that we found in these DAPSA cases. Look at this, males. We have twice as many victims that identify as men in our DAPSA cases. Now, other research has shown that homosexual men are more likely to use dating apps, especially in conservative cultures, which Utah is a conservative culture, because it's difficult to openly forge romantic relationships. We think that is why we see this higher level of those who identify as men or male in these numbers. College student, we found, and again, you'll notice by those p-values, I am only sharing all those things that are statistically significant. We found a higher number of college students in the DAPSA cases. About 50% or over 50% of college students report using at least one dating app. So this is the demographic of high dating app users. We also found a lower amount of patient drug use in the DAPSA cases. So you'll notice alcohol use and drug use is both lower in these DAPSA cases. Well, we know that alcohol use and drug use can be a situational factor that can make somebody more vulnerable for sexual assault. Yet we see this decreased in the DAPSA cases. So now let's look at assailant actions. Again, these are all statistically significant. So when we do a sexual assault medical forensic exam, we ask our patients if there was ejaculation during the assault. Now, the numbers that I have given you here, where it has 53% and 34%, this is 53% of victims said yes. And in the non-DAPSA cases, you can see 34% said yes. Well, what we have found overall is that in cases, if you combine our entire data set, 56% of victims, when we ask them if ejaculation occurred, they say, I don't know, because that's not what they're focused on. And when I do education with law enforcement, I talk about this as something to look at that indicates non-consensual sexual act, because generally in consensual sex, individuals know if their partner has ejaculated, but we see high numbers of unknown in sexual assault. Condom use, increased condom use in the DAPSA cases, as well as increased lubrication use. This may indicate a higher degree of premeditation. Overall, the condom use is low in sexual assaults. When you compare it to data from college surveys, when they ask students about condom use, about 45% of college students report using condoms in sexual relationships. Again, this low use of condom use is a sign of a non-consensual sexual act, because you don't have a partnership where you're talking about, so how are we going to prevent pregnancy? How are we going to prevent sexually transmitted infection? This is a crime of power and control, and that discussion doesn't happen. So we see overall low condom use in sexual assault, but higher in the DAPSA cases, as well as higher lubrication. Strangulation. When we ran this number, we were really pretty sickened by this. You can see that we have very high rates, almost a third, it's actually 32.4% of victims who meet on a dating app report being strangled during the sexual assault. Now, we have high numbers in the non-DAPSA, but almost a third. This indicates a higher degree of lethality, higher degree of violence within the sexual assault in the DAPSA cases. Assailant alcohol use, and I'll tell you, both assailant alcohol use and drug use, most victims say, I don't know, especially in these DAPSA cases, because they're not sure if before they met, this is somebody they don't know. They're just getting together at the first in-person meeting. They're not sure if the assailant used drugs or alcohol. And then we found higher degrees. We always ask our patients, did the assailant try to wash or clean you? Again, this may indicate a higher degree of premeditation in these DAPSA cases. So now let's look at additional assault characteristics. We found that in the DAPSA cases, victims are less likely to report a loss of consciousness. We always ask our patient, at any point, did you lose consciousness or awareness? Now you'll see that about 50% say yes. That's a separate study that we are doing. We know that that is associated with alcohol use, drug-facilitated sexual assault. strangulation, but we also know that that's associated with the effects of the trauma of experiencing a sexual assault. We also found that in these DAPSA cases, there are more assaultive or penetrative acts. Overall, these are more violent sexual assaults, and you can see that by the numbers there. It's a higher degree of penetrative acts. We look at, was the victim asleep and then awakened to being assaulted? Our non-DAPSA cases, that's 14%. We see that less in the DAPSA cases, 5%. We also see a lower amount of suspected drug-facilitated sexual assault in the DAPSA cases. We also found a difference in the location, with a higher amount of cases of sexual assault being in cars and houses and apartments. We looked at injuries. We found that DAPSA victims had more victims had anogenital injuries, 50% of the victims compared to 39% of victims. And then we found that those that had anogenital injuries, they were likely to have more anogenital injuries. But remember, I talked about that these are more penetrative or assaultive sexual assaults. And so with more penetrative acts, the victims are more likely to have injury, anogenital injury. When we look at anogenital injuries, where it occurred, these are the locations that we look at for anogenital injury. The fossa and posterior fourchette is at the base of the vaginal opening. It's where we see generally most injuries from sexual assault. And then we look at the type of injuries. We found that there were higher degrees of abrasions. Abrasions is the rubbing off of the top layer of skin, and higher amounts of lacerations. Lacerations are where the skin splits because of blunt force trauma. Other research have shown that if there are lacerations found after somebody has had sex, whether it's consensual or non-consensual, that in non-consensual sex, it is more likely to find lacerations specifically. So when we look at non-anogenital injuries, we have found overall that victims, most non-anogenital injuries occur on extremities, and they are generally bruises or abrasions. And I know when I talk to my patients, they will frequently talk about struggling to get away, and they might be held by extremities. And this results in more injuries to extremities frequently than other areas. Interestingly, we found that non-anogenital injuries in the DAPSA cases, 71% of the victims had documented non-anogenital injuries compared to 64% of the non-DAPSA. But we found that location, the big difference was breast injuries. That in these DAPSA cases, remember, we found these to be more violent sexual assaults, that almost a quarter of the victims have injuries to their breast. They have a mean of 5 non-anogenital injuries. So to summarize what we found, 1/3 of the victims were strangled, indicating a higher degree of lethality, more violent sexual assault. We found that the DAPSA cases, there were more assaultive acts, resulting in more victim injuries. We also look at, we ask victims, because this helps guide our examination, looking for injury and also collecting evidence, we ask them about their actions. We found that in these DAPSA cases, that victims were actually less likely to fight back, to hit the assailant, 9% compared to 14%, to try to kick, 6% compared to 10%. When you look at those numbers, realize that overall, we have low numbers of victims who fight back against perpetrators. Consider that most of our victims are women who are smaller than the assailant. And frequently they fear trying to fight back because of additional harm that could come to them. But we see this even heightened in the DAPSA victims. I want you to think about these victims in these DAPSA sexual assault. They don't know this person. And I will say all of our assailants were men. We had a couple cases where it was a combination of both a man and a woman, but they were all men involved as assailants. So they get together with this person that they've just met on a dating app, and then this violence occurs with a high degree, almost a third of the victims strangled, almost a quarter with breast injuries, more penetrative assaultive actions. These victims, when we look at the statements that they say, they're terrified. We have many victims that said statements such as, I thought I was going to die, or I just laid there because I was so scared. So we have to wonder if with this really increased, heightened degree of fear that these victims feel, do we have a higher amount of freezing or tonic immobility? When somebody experiences a sexual assault, the sympathetic nervous system reacts, which we think of with our fight or flight, but then our parasympathetic nervous system begins to react as the fear increases. And it's been well documented that in sexual assault cases, there's a higher amount of freezing or tonic immobility. And this may be the case, as we found that victims were less likely to try to fight back. So we found that these DAPSA cases absolutely are unique when we go to answer our research question. Are there differences? There are profound differences. The DAPSA patients we found more males, we found more college students, we found more have a permanent address indicating a higher socioeconomic status. We found mental illness as a huge vulnerability in DAPSA cases. We found less alcohol and drug use in DAPSA cases than non-DAPSA cases. We found, again, this higher instance of strangulation and assaultive penetrative acts. The victims had more injuries, and the DAPSA assailants appear to be more prepared for the sexual assaults with higher condom use and higher washing or cleaning the victim post-assault. These findings have led us to postulate that violent perpetrators use dating apps as hunting grounds for vulnerable victims. It is a proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing, because online presence, people can be who they want to be. And we believe that violent perpetrators, motivated offenders for sexual assault, really have seen dating apps as an ability to connect with these vulnerable victims, specifically, in this case, vulnerability of mental illness. So I want to get just a couple minutes, and we're going to close out about what have we found on dating apps. So these are just screenshots from a number of dating apps. So how did dating apps try to prevent sexual assault? Well, pretty much they try to prevent it by having written safety guidelines. The challenge and the problem with that is then that places all of the burden on the potential victim for stopping a sexual assault. If you read these written safety guidelines and meet them, and you'll see right here, one of them says, always meet in a public place. I will tell you that many of these patients, these victims, that's exactly what they did. They met in a public place initially, and then they began to feel, oh, this is a really good person. I feel like I can trust this person. And so agreed to go with them on that initial meeting to a more isolated area. And then the person changed, and that's when the sexual and became more violent. And that's when the sexual assault occurred. But the problem with this is how we're going to prevent sexual assault is having written safety guidelines is one, sometimes they're really hard to find. But the bigger issue is that actually increases victim blaming, because we say, or society may say, well, we've got these guidelines to follow. Well, if they don't follow these guidelines, it also may increase victims feeling like I'm to blame, and then they may not report, and we want people to report. We also found, interestingly, that these dating apps don't use the term sexual assault. They can use, you see it says report in person physical harm. They avoid the term sexual assault. We feel that dating apps need to openly address this to help protect the users, because we need to openly acknowledge this. Our recommendations are to move beyond written safety guidelines, to openly address sexual assault. What artificial intelligence improvements can be used by dating apps to identify potential violent offenders? Criminal history searches, there are certainly challenges with those, but that potentially could help identify perpetrators. Definitely need to improve reporting mechanisms with clearly stating about sexual assault, openly provide resources for survivors. And then the challenge, and other studies have documented this, that a perpetrator can just jump from one dating app to another dating app. There needs to be communication between dating apps. I helped to write this legislation that just passed in Utah, that is online dating safety amendments. It is House Bill 11, passed in 2023. We believe that this bill is the best in the country, addressing dating app safety, and specifically requirements that dating apps need to clearly state sexual assault. They need to clearly state that if someone is a victim of sexual assault, it's not their fault, and to clearly state if criminal background checks are done. Generally, they're not done, and provide easier reporting mechanisms, because we need to all work together to identify this wolf, or these wolves in sheep's clothing. Here's our article that was published in Journal of Interpersonal Violence that goes into more detail on these findings. The overall goal is that we can create a society where our survivors will take the hard things that happen to them, the sexual assault, this is a card I give to all of my patients, and find a way to bloom. Here are references, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michaela Ascoli, the forensic scientist at RTI International, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you, Dr. Valentine, for your presentation. Looks like we have a ton of questions, so let's jump in.
Okay, great.
All right, the first question is, when discussing patient characteristics, what was the criteria for defining mental illness?
Great question. When we care for a patient and conduct a sexual assault medical forensic exam, one of our questions, because this is for healthcare, is we ask, do you have any chronic conditions? And some patients will state, I have migraines and asthma and depression and anxiety. They will state mental illness when we ask a question if they have any chronic or medical conditions. We also ask about medication, because that impacts our care as well. And we ask, do you take any medications every day? We have some patients that will possibly not state that they have PTSD or depression, but they might be on 4 or 5 psychotropic medications. So I have a team of researchers that are psych mental health doctorates, led by Dr. Leslie Miles. And we go through and we look at those that did not disclose mental illness, but disclose psychotropic medications. We combine those to say self-disclosed mental illness. The majority of those, the patients do self-disclose mental illness. We have written 3 papers on the mental illness as a vulnerability for sexual assault. If you're interested in knowing more about those published articles, send me an email. Happy to refer you to those as well.
Great. Thank you for answering that. It's good to know that, you're collaborating with SMEs, subject matter experts on that. All right, the next question we have is, do you have stats for those in the LGBT community? And are people who are falling under the category victimized at a higher rate? Or is there a particular race or population that tends to have a higher victim stat?
Great question. We are always worried about marginalized populations, and it's another field that we are looking at related to sexual assault as a vulnerability. As part of the sexual assault medical forensic exams, we do not ask sexual orientation, so I do not have that information. We do ask regarding what gender people identify as. If someone identifies as transgender before in a general exam, that is good information to know regarding any changes, surgeries that they may have had. When you look at other research that supports that we do see higher rates, it's a higher vulnerability. And I like saying vulnerability rather than risk factor, because risk factor implies that the person could change that risk. Vulnerability implies that somebody has taken advantage or victimized someone. So we look at that as vulnerability. We purposely did not list patients that are transgender in this study, and we do have some. The reason why is because our numbers were so small. We are very aware of wanting to make sure our information is de-identified, and we clearly state the years of our study. And because we have so few transgender patients, we opted as a research team to not include their numbers. Overall, when I work with our rape recovery centers, we're very worried that they're less likely to seek healthcare because we have much higher numbers that then go to rape recovery center for services, where our numbers for that population is pretty low in providing healthcare. It's an area we need to work on.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering that. No, that makes sense. All right, another audience member has stated their understanding that crime has 3 elements: legal, moral, and material. How does this relate to the definition of crime you described, in which crime occurs from the intermix of likely offender, suitable target, and absence of capable guardian?
I love this question. I love theory. We have published the results of our study that's in this webinar. It's in Journal of Interpersonal Violence, and it is referenced in our references. And there are 2 theories that we use to help frame our study. One is, as you implied, routine activities theory, which has been used in a lot of cyber crimes, where we do look at a motivated offender, suitable targets, and the absence of capable guardians. The other theory that we looked at is a confluence model of sexual aggression. That helped to provide some understanding on these findings, where we look at these dark personality traits that we see more in specifically men that use dating apps, and we explicate that more in our article. In the article, we don't dive in to those areas that you suggested, but boy, that would be a whole other paper and really fascinating to help us understand this issue more.
Yeah, no, thank you. All right, another question. How does your analysis of dating apps compare to other exploitable settings, such as bars or college parties?
Another great question. We don't specifically look at those exploitable settings. That's not a variable where how they met. But I would say that we are comparing victims that met through a dating app, and the first time they get together, they are sexually assaulted, to other acquaintance sexual assaults, which would include those other exploitable settings. So I think that group is in our comparison group that we are looking at with these DAPSA cases.
No, for sure. All right. Then another question has come in about, are there differences observed among different dating apps, Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, etc.?
I get asked this every time I talk about this. We purposely did not code for which dating app. We took them all as one, because if we code for different ones, then we really have to look at, well, how many people actually use Tinder, which a lot of people use Tinder, and Bumble, and we have a religious one that we had many patients on as well. So we did not divide that up, but towards the end, I talk about some of these similarities that all of the dating apps have that we feel are areas that they need to improve on within their sites.
I think kind of touching off of that question, I think other questions have also asked if, other social media sites have been included, or if you're aware of any data or research related to other social media platforms right now.
Right, and we do have some, this is an ongoing study, so we're looking at continuing this. We do have some cases where they didn't meet on a dating app, but it was an online platform. And so that is a smaller percentage in our study than what we saw that were meeting on a dating app platform.
All right. And then another question in regards to dating apps, but are violent offenders who have been documented, who have a documented charge against them, allowed on dating apps? And if they have no previous charges, but are now accused of assault, are they removed from these dating sites?
Great question. So dating apps, when you sign up for a dating app, they will ask if people just self-report if you have any charges filed against you. So it's pretty easy to click no. So your answer is yes, they absolutely can be on dating apps and jump from dating app to dating app.
And can you expand a bit on your earlier comments about dating app algorithms, potentially pairing these vulnerable individuals with motivated offenders?
Regarding the algorithms, that was a question that a reporter had asked me if I had considered that. And quite honestly, before this reporter had asked me, I had not considered that. So I think that's something that the dating app companies, I would hope that they would look at. Are there something in their algorithms that are actually more likely to pair these more vulnerable individuals with motivated offenders? I wish I knew information on that. I don't, but I think it's something that the dating app companies, I'm hoping, are evaluating.
No, I agree. I think definitely in your presentation, you touched on a variety of ways these dating app companies could improve upon their platforms. Right, kind of getting into more methodology, regards to your p-value, can you describe what your null hypothesis was? Was DAPSA cases compared to non-DAPSA cases or vice versa?
We were looking at, our question is, were there differences between the two? So DAPSA cases were compared to the non-DAPSA cases, again, all under the umbrella of those cases that we would code as acquaintance relationship between the assailant and the victim. We certainly have about 14% of our cases are IPV, either current spouse, partner, or ex-partner. So we took those out. We took out those cases where the relationship was on our form, it's other. That usually is somebody in a position of power and control, a boss, manager, or a family member. We did not include those, and we did not include stranger. They're all looking at DAPSA cases versus non-DAPSA cases under the umbrella.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have another question regarding, was follow-up research done on the perpetrators? Is there data to show if the prep was honest with their age, race, gender? Was any profile done on the perpetrators?
Oh, I would love to do this, gather more information. Again, that is a limitation of this study. Our information came from the sexual assault medical forensic exam records. I would like to expand and add criminal case outcomes in our further research that we are doing, really looking at these cases. And you know, I want to point out, we only have about 12%, in Utah, only about 12% of sexual assault victims report for sexual assault medical forensic exam. So the information I shared with you is just the tip of the iceberg, right? These are the ones that had reported. And what I'd like to do is follow those cases that did report and look at the criminal case outcomes, and did these that reported stay with the system? Was their case investigated? Was it prosecuted? If we do that and move forward with that, then we would be able to gather more information about the perpetrators. So that may be coming, we hope.
Yeah, well, hopefully that'll get done soon and we'll get to see the results. Right. Another question was there any information collected about sexting among victim offenders before they met offline?
No, I do not have any information about sexting, or because when that's not part of our exam records. So I don't have information on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, again, you mentioned that the study takes place in Utah. Someone is asking, what other conclusions or correlations could you draw knowing that the culture is heavily influenced by religion?
Yeah, I will say it did take place in Utah. In our article, we talk about it as a Mountain West state, partially because we think that the findings that we have here in Utah are going to be applied to other areas of the country. When I talk to colleagues, I think we're all seeing a number of patients who meet on a dating app and then are sexually assaulted. Regarding the effect of religion, I think that in locations where there's a much more conservative culture, the concern is we're less likely to have individuals report. And we do know that. We do have lower reporting rates in Utah. That's something that we need to work on. Tomorrow is the first Wednesday of April, which is Start by the Believing Day. And Utah in 2015, we signed a Start by Believing proclamation. I will be at the Capitol doing a press conference and kickoff for April Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And the importance of believing victims. We have a lot of research that shows there's low false reporting in sexual assault, 2 to 8%, which is the same as other crimes, and the importance of believing victims and creating a culture where they feel comfortable and supported in reporting.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that. It looks like we're kind of at the top of the hour here. Unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to get to everyone's questions today. If your question hasn't been answered, feel free to reach out to Dr. Valentine to get those burning questions answered. But we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you so much, Dr. Valentine, for being here. If you have any final thoughts to share before we end.
Just to thank everyone. It means if you're here, you are working hard to decrease sexual violence and to improve justice in these cases and support survivors. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Before you leave today's webinar, I'd like to draw your attention to our feedback form. It takes less than 5 minutes to complete and can be accessed via the checkbox icon directly above the chat. Your honest feedback is invaluable as we continually search for ways to improve and provide the best experience possible. Lastly, across the top of the live stream window are links to our social media profiles, including Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. There is also a link to the FTCOE website, the Just Science podcast, and the FTCOE newsletter registration. Like, follow, or subscribe to stay up to date with everything the FTCOE is doing in support of the forensic community. Thank you again for attending, and we hope everyone has a great day.